Hi everyone, welcome to week 9 of me ranting and raving about people not doing their assignments properly. I do hope that you've gotten something out of it so far. I feel like even if you haven't implemented it straight away, some of the changes may be subconscious, and you will slowly make the changes to improve your grades. Just improve your efficiency in the way that you do things. Has anybody changed the way they do things yet? Or you've noticed that they do things differently on a subconscious level? Does anyone intend to change things? Just not yet. Yeah. So as long as one person got something out of it, I'm okay with it. And it's not about changing everything that you do. It's about slowly changing your habits. And as those habits change over time, you then become better. And then you see the benefit, and then you change. And eventually, the bad habits go. So this is going to be all about how to write your draft. Kind of fits in with what we did last week, with the proofreading. And so, anyone know what a draft is of their assignment? Yes, okay, sorry, I should have said this. And in your words, what is the draft? What is the purpose of the draft? How would you approach it? Anyone? So Izzy says like a rough or first copy, yep. So for me, the draft should be your attempt, your completed work. You should never hand your teacher, unless they specifically ask for only part of the assignment as the draft. If you get one chance at writing a draft, then you want to hand in your best work. Perhaps I should have done this before last week, but hindsight is wrong. So for me, your draft is not what you give to your teacher should not be your first draft. If you only get one chance, sometimes they say hand in a little bit at a time. Again, that's fine to do it. But when they say, okay, you get to give me one draft a week before the assignment's due, what most people do is they say, well, it's the teacher's problem to tell me how to do my assignment. In actual fact, it's not. Your teacher is supposed to mark your work and give you feedback based on what you've written. If you haven't written half the assignment, all they're going to say is there was nothing here. And there's absolutely no point handing in a draft. It's not attempt. Not saying it has to be your best work, but something you've put some thought into. A lot of times you get given a draft, they've gone the day before it's due, I'll put something together, the teacher will tell me what I need to do. And no, it's not the teacher's problem. If you did that at university, you would get laughed at. It is not anyone else's problem to do your assignment but your own. Not your teachers, not your parents, not your friends, yours. So the better quality draft you can hand to your teacher, the better the outcome will be. Like with the proofreading and the editing last week, the better off, the less finicky things the teacher has to pick up on, the more they can guide your assignment as a whole. Okay, why is having a draft important? Yeah, so your other sense helps to work out what you did right and what you can improve on. If you don't write anything, or you write something half cooked, the day it was due, you thought I'd write something, you're not going to know whether you're on the right track. So yeah, Olivia says allow us to get feedback for you or you're fine. The key is to give your best work. And unfortunately, most of the time it is not the case. So again, and I'll keep coming back to the point of it's important because it will help you guide you towards the next grade. So if you hand in something that is an E average because you couldn't bother, the teacher isn't going to tell you how to get an A. If you hand in something that's a B average, an A minus average, your teacher is going to push you to get that next grade. You hand in an E minus draft to your teacher, you're going to feel a little bit insulted that you bothered handing something like that. And I don't say that as in if you've not put any effort in, then the teachers will be disappointed. They won't give you as good a feedback. If you've put in the effort and it's all wrong, the teacher is likely to give you more feedback than if you just. So that's why drafting is important. So you're sitting down to do an assignment. What is your plan for your first draft? Olivia says, get all of your ideas down in a way that makes sense. Yeah. So Izzy says, figuring out a structure. So both of those are correct. And it helps you to just get something on the paper. I wouldn't hand your first draft into your teacher. If a teacher says you can hand in 2 or 3 drafts, even then I would still hand in at each point a better and better draft. So if you're allowed to hand in 3 drafts, finish your assignment, edit it and proofread it, then send it. Then they will give you feedback and then you implement the feedback. Give them another draft and that feedback is getting more and more specific each time you hand in the draft. So by the time you hand it in, your teacher will have told you everything you need to know to get an A. Hand in something at the beginning, which is half the word count. It's a nothing effort. Then by the time the second draft, by the time you get to the third draft, you're handing in what you should have handed in for the first draft. Does that make sense? Okay. So you've handed in your first draft. Your teacher's given you some feedback. So you've done your first draft, you've proofreaded it, you've proofread it, you've edited it, you've had someone else read it, you've gone over it with a fine-tooth comb, you've given your best effort to your teacher. Now your teacher has given you feedback just on the way you've answered the question. Try using this kind of language, try adding this here. And then for the second draft, all you're doing is changing exactly what the teacher's told you. You shouldn't need to do anything else. And like I said, if you hand the teacher a really quality first draft, it's a different mindset for them. They will give you a lot more feedback than if you give them something of a half effort. So the second draft is now just implementing the teacher's feedback into what you've done. The final draft is what you hand in. So first draft is getting it up to your standard for the academic writing, the referencing, the spelling, punctuation, grammar. So that all your teacher has to do is then mark how you've answered the question. So you're going to get a lot more specific feedback. The second draft is implementing the teacher's feedback. Now, you can ask your teacher to then look at it again. Some of them won't, but some of them will. And then by the time you get to the final draft, and you're about to hand it in, you should be handing in something that is bang on. So I say the most effort should go into the first draft. Who puts effort into the first draft? Or they just hand in whatever? So Izzy says she puts the most effort in the final draft. Who else? Anyone else a final drafter? So Ewan is yes. So Olivia says I do as much as I can in each draft. And again, I find myself just ranting about the same thing sometimes. But that first draft sets the tone in your teacher's mind. So the more you can do for the first draft is what, usually 3 weeks out from when the assignment's due, depending on what it is. So if you have it pretty well done by then, you can then spend more effort when your feedback comes back and less stress into making it perfect, as opposed to handing in half done, 3/4 done, and then finished. So the less anxiety you have towards the assignment at the end, so the more effort you put into the drafts, the more, what's the word? More precise the energy that you're putting in. You're not clouded with anxiety. All you have to do is hone it and make it perfect, as opposed to, oh no, I have to make this up to a passing level 2 days before it's due. If you go into 2 days before it's due, going, all I have to do is make this perfect, you're really a lot less stressed. Again, I will say it again and again, it is not your teacher's job to fix your work. The draft feedback is there to help you improve your work. And nor is it the job of your tutor to do the work for you. When you get feedback from a tutor, from a teacher, it's up to you to understand and implement that feedback. A lot of people also think that if a teacher doesn't write something, then that isn't right. Then that is, it's the teacher doesn't think it's wrong. A lot of the time, they only have 5 to 10 minutes per assignment. Some assignments, if they're long enough, will take that long just to read through, let alone give adequate feedback. And you'll find that, again, repeating myself a bit, that you'll get better feedback with the higher the quality, the work that you hand in for drafts, the better feedback you will receive. You hand in, the teacher doesn't want to see 500 words out of 2,000 words handed in for a first draft. 1,000 words, 1,500 words, as close to the real thing that you can hand in, the better the feedback you're going to get. So, who remembers proofreading from last week? So we're checking for spelling, checking for grammar, we're checking for structure, we answered the assignment question. Because the more time the teacher spends marking your proofreading stuff that you should have done, the less they're going to have, the less time and space they're going to have to mark the actual, your response to the assignment question. That's when you print the assignment out. If it's like 50 pages, obviously don't print it out. And go through it with a red pen, viciously with a red pen. Every little mistake, check your referencing. Yeah, so proofreading and editing are really, really important in a draft. Obviously, they're important for anything, but if you're handing in a draft, make sure it's not filled with spelling mistakes and grammatical errors. Okay, so how do you start writing? If you're having an assignment, how do you start? Are you a methodical sit down? If it's a report, you make all the headings, make all the header and footer, or are you just, I'm just going to start writing and eventually something will happen? So Kelly's, the headings, sit there and make sure everything's lined up correctly, same font, everything's indented. So Izzy just jots all her thoughts down. Kelly's a headings person, so there's one extreme to the other. Well, I wouldn't say Izzy's one extreme, she's probably somewhere in the middle. But another idea is just start writing or typing things out as they come into your head. Just start writing. Once you start writing, ideas start to flow. What I'm trying to tell my Year 12 biology students at the moment is to answer the short answer questions first. Because that writing will get the juices flowing in your head. Then you go to the multiple choice questions and the information should be easier to access. But once you start writing, then ideas start to flow. Who finds that the first 200 words are the hardest part of an assignment? Just getting something on the page. Getting that start going. Yeah. So for most people, the first 200 words take about as long as the second 800. And that's why sometimes just sitting down and writing is the best way. Some people, this doesn't work. Some people need the structure. They need to start at a certain point. Kelly is probably one of those people. Me, I just used to start writing. I would read everything I could, make notes, direct quotes, copy paste, whatever, and just start writing. And then I would make sense of it at the end. It's perhaps not as efficient as being super organized, but it gets the ball rolling. Breaks that anxiety of how am I going to write so many words. So, write what you know. Then read. So then you start doing your research. Once you've written out what you know, that should tell you what you don't know and what you need to find out. So you write out what you know out of your head. Whilst you're doing that, you start to read up on the topic. And this allows you to fill the knowledge gaps that you have in order to answer the question. If you don't write out what you know first, then you just end up reading lots of stuff you already know. And it allows you to direct your energy more efficiently. And then write some more. So now you know what you know, start writing. Lots of people say that you should who just does their research first, they don't write anything. Anyone? So Izzy writes down her research, good way to do it. Everyone's different. Sometimes it's more efficient. So the way I do it, write, read, write, all kind of at the same time. A little bit of overlap between the three. And before you know it, you've got half your word count, you've got a couple of references, you've got a direct quote, and now you just have to put all the information around that for the analysis. Then I create a structure. The problem with creating a structure is it doesn't always allow you to be fluid. So if you go into doing an assignment with, this is how my assignment's going to look, this is how it's going to be based, but that doesn't allow you to be adaptive and change things on the fly. Because if you write the structure first, and this is what I'm going to write about, but it turns out that you're wrong, then you've just done a whole lot of work for not much. So I like to make my outline, so very basic. If it's an essay, then obviously it's not so important, but for reports, so introduction, abstract, table of contents, all the way down. I used to do this first, but then I found myself, I was sticking to that structure too rigidly. So I needed to be able to write a little more freely. Sometimes if I was really stuck on what to write, I would just start doing the outline first. And that sort of making that logical flow and ladder of ideas got my brain juices going enough to start writing. I've heard the saying, you shouldn't make a plan to make a plan. So I'm going to write on my to-do list, write a to-do list. Because that momentum of writing your to-do list and ticking it off your to-do list allows you to keep going, gives you a bit of motivation. So if you then do the structure and it looks like you've got something down, get a little endorphin rush. Oh, I'm going to write a little bit. I'm going to write a little bit. So sometimes it does help to do the outline in the beginning. Not always. I personally wouldn't recommend. So once you've written, you've found your resources for your general information. Now find the information to support your ideas. What you've done first is get all of your background information. So if you're doing heart disease, you found lots of stats for heart disease, you found lots of images to go with it. Now you need to find your information to back up your idea. So that's where we go find our sources, we reference them, and we put them in. Always include your reference list in your draft, because then also your teacher can check your references and tell you if they're good enough or not. Nothing worse handing in an assignment and then you realize you haven't used the right references. Had you included those references in your draft, your teacher could have told you that you needed to include that those references were not adequate. Again, make sure you reference properly in your draft. The last thing you want to do is get your reference wrong. A, because it can land you in trouble, and B, because it's such an easy 10 marks to get. You can, the difference between A and a B, B and a C, passing, failing, can often be down to your referencing. So you want your teacher to be able to check what references you have. Have you done the referencing correctly? Have you chosen the right sources? Make sure you include them in your drafts every single time. And if you don't, then you are going to open yourself up to plagiarism as well. So if you've used a direct quote but you haven't referenced it in your draft, it just looks like you've copied and pasted that without giving any kind of credit. Again, you're wanting to give the first draft the highest possible standing you can with your teachers. You can only do that if you do the referencing properly. So once you have all your information, once you have all of your arguments done, who writes their introduction first? You should never write your introduction first. You should never write introduction first. Who knows why? I mean, you should always write your introduction first. I mean, last. You should never write it first. You should always write it last. Because it, for the most part, it's introducing everything you've written about. Remember how I said sticking to that rigid structure sometimes is bad? It's definitely bad if you've written your introduction first. So if you write your introduction first and you're covering your main ideas, but halfway through you change your mind, but you don't change your introduction, then your introduction doesn't make any sense. So for your sake and my blood pressure sake, don't write your introduction first. Write it last. It is introducing all the topics you've spoken about in a cohesive manner. And if you haven't written about anything and you write your introduction and you decide halfway through, oh, I'm going to change it, then your introduction doesn't make any sense and you're just making more work for yourself. You can find information for your introduction, but actually writing it should happen around the time you write the conclusion. So next, does anyone write the conclusion first? I hope not. I'll be really surprised if anyone does. Okay, I'll take that as no one writes the conclusion first. And so the conclusion should be written last because it is just a rehash of what you've already said. It tells us if you've answered, how you answered the research question or the question the assignment was asking. And it should not introduce any new ideas. So it should always be written last. It's fairly self-explanatory. And there's two ways of thinking. That you start with your structure, where you just write and write and write and write, put together a collision, and then you put it together in paragraphs. And then you make it make sense. And then you use the linking sentences. There isn't a right or wrong way. I'm a bit of a scatterbrain, so I like to write as much as I can, and then at the end I will go through and link the ideas together. Some people like to work methodically, top to bottom. And there's nothing wrong with either way. Writing it all and then putting it all together is probably less efficient than writing it and linking it as you're going along in a very logical way. Some of you will be, anybody the mad writing and then put it all together at the end? Amen. No? Anybody who's the methodical, work from top to bottom, link everything together as you go? Kelly, yeah. Most people are. Not everybody's a scatterbrain like I am. So once it's all together, just like we talked about in proofreading, shut it off. Finish this draft 3 days before it's due, 2 days before it's due. Don't look at it again until the night before. Now, we're not doing anything to the assignment. We're just going to sit down and edit it, print it off, go through with a red pen, go through on your screen, whatever. I'm a big on looking at what my hand is doing. So I'll print it off and edit it through that. Then we proofread, we give it to someone else to look through, we print it off, we compare it to the exemplars that are available. And by then, you should be, your assignment should be finished. The draft is not about finishing your assignment after it's handed in. The draft should be finished. The proofreading and by your teacher and the next draft, if you're allowed one, is about polishing what you've already written. You shouldn't really be adding too much to your draft. Once your teacher's had it, it should be, okay, yep, they'll go through it, and that you'll get a lot of feedback because they don't need to think too much. They're not reading through it, checking your grammar and spelling. That's all done. They can read it. They know it's good. So you get a lot of feedback to polish or hone your work. Now, this is when you go from a B to an A or a C to a B or a D to a C, not you need to fix all your spelling and grammar and you haven't actually answered the question. So that's why proofreading and editing are super important. And actually finishing the assignment as a draft. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be complete. Because if the teacher needs to tell you how to finish your assignment, they're not telling you how to make it perfect or better. They're just saying, you know what, how about you just hand in something that is finished to the assignment, whereas they want you to do, if they see that it's finished, they want you to do really well. So they will help you a lot, more so than if you give them something that's half completed. And then give it to your teacher. Once it's completed, you edit it, you've proofread it, someone else has read it, you've gone over it 16 times, then you hand in your draft. I feel like I'm just ranting over again. But give it to your teacher and then just let them help you make the assignment better. Not, you need to write 500 more words, is your feedback. Because I can't give you feedback because you've only written half of it. They don't know if you've answered the assignment correctly. They don't know if there's something missing because you haven't put everything there. So I hope if there's one thing you take out of this logical flow, is that give your teacher the best possible draft that you can. And that's the end of my TED Talk. So who's going to hand in better drafts now? guarantee you, watch the feedback you get from your teachers and the difference when you hand in a really good draft. You hand them something that you haven't put any effort into, why should the teacher put any effort in? If you're not going to give them the respect of handing in something that you've put effort into, then they're not going to reciprocate respect back to you. They will reciprocate disrespect and give it, a few points. Give them something that you're proud of. Give them something where they really want to help you get to the next level. If you give them something that's a draft at a B, they want you to get to an A. If you give them 500 words out of 1,000 and it's sitting at a C minus, that's, whatever. You give them something where you've clearly put a lot of effort in, you've completed the task. It may not be perfect, but they will guide you towards getting the better mark. And that's what I hope.